Hi everyone, this is John with Cobalt Butterfly. There was a number of people who expressed an interest in understanding how to make their own paste. There's a lot of paste in the industry right now you can buy from a number of different places, including our store. But I wanted to make clear that making paste is not a process that really, we did a lot of testing over time when we were developing ours, trying to find out what causes paste to sell, when you get those beautiful cells and lacing and things like that, and what doesn't, and how they interact, why some do and why some don't. And going over, looking at the different chemicals, and some of them they have a scent to them, some of them don't. We decided to do a number of tests, and this is basically what we've discovered is that, as I had suspected for a long time, that density is everything when it comes to why you get cells when you do certain things. So this is going to be a very simple formula. This is the basics of what you can do to get a paste that is not guaranteed to sell, because it depends on what you put it over, but using the process that we've outlined in our videos before regarding using things such as stone coat countertops, base tints such as the base white, and how to allow, which is a less dense material because of what's in it once you mix it into your resin. I'll show you how to make paste, which is a denser material, and the results of that increases the chance that you'll get cells when you use either a heat gun or swipe or whatever and blow that over on top of something that's lighter, such as the base tint. So everybody's probably been wondering, what is it that makes a paste? Well, first off, you have powder. I'm going to use a mica today. Mica is much easier to mix in. Pigments do mix in, but you need a little bit more intensive work just because they're finer and you want to avoid clumping. You'll need a container. I'm using a medicine bottle just because it was around. The lids also go on real nice, and they're not airtight, but they're tight enough that when you make a paste, it'll seal pretty well and just kind of make a little bit. And that's not that paste is going to dry out, that's for sure. But it's good to keep things from, when it knocks over, it's got a lid on it and everything like that. You need a spoon, depending on how much you want. You may need a smaller spoon, depending on how much you want to make. Because what I'm going to go through here is basically a formula that will allow you to make large quantities or small quantities. If you just need a spot of a certain color, you want to customize things, you can, if you don't like the blues here, if you don't like blue, you can use red. This is allow you to use any pigment or mica mix that you want if you want to get into mixing colors and things like that. So the magic ingredient to all this, people might have the impression that there's a bunch of chemicals and things. Not, because some do have chemicals in them and things like that, but the magic ingredient for this is pretty simple. It's the hardener part of a two-part epoxy. We have used stone coat, we've tested it with countertop epoxy, we've tested it with art resin, we've tested it with a stone coat art coat and the stone coat countertop, and the results are basically the same. This is the denser of the two parts of the epoxy, and because it's denser, when you mix something into it and then mix it into pre-mixed resin to color it, this creates an overall density that is higher, which increases the potential for cells to be created. So I'm going to do this it's a real short video. I'm going to do this. I'm going to pour some in here. I'm going to add the powder, show you how to mix it up. And then in the next video, I'll go ahead and take it inside the house where we do our pouring and actually do a pour with this particular paste so you can see how the cells pop out over stone coat countertops base tint. Side notes for when you're mixing powders up, because you're using a mica and things like that, you want to go ahead and use gloves. As always, we're working with resin. It is suggested to wear a mask as well. I'm not wearing a mask at this point right now simply because it's a lot harder to hear me. The microphone won't pick my voice up as much. I put in, it's hard to see, I put in hardener about halfway up, which will be a decent amount of paste. And taking the mica, it's going to be messy, but we found that, actually I'm just go ahead and dump this in. We found that it's about a 1-to-1 ratio, and it's rough, but basically when you're adding powder also, just keep in mind that because you're making this, it's totally up to you as to how thick or thin you want the paste to be. You can have it be a liquid if you want, and if you have it as a liquid, it will be a denser material for the amount of color that you put in, because the ratio of hardener to mica or pigment will be lower. So in other words, if you put in a powder and you have only a little bit and it's a really liquidy material, you may need to put in more in order to get the opacity that you want out of the final resin. That will increase the density. There are limits, because if you put in too much hardener, it's going to affect your cure. So it's important to keep those things in mind. It may take some experimentation, but so I've added the powder. You want to carefully stick this, put in a stir stick and kind of mix it up and get it in there. If you go a little bit too crazy with it, you're going to start seeing clouds come out, because the micas and especially pigments are very, very light materials, and they're prone to coming out of the container, whatever you're mixing. Originally, we tried this in a manner of how some people mix oil paints, which uses things such as linseed oil and things like that, which is how oil paints are made. And it's a very similar process, but they'll use a palette knife on a piece of glass, which works really well, and in some cases for very small amounts is a great way to get the perfect viscosity or the thickness that you want for the paste that you're making. So I've mixed a good portion of the paste in, or the powder into the paste. And I'm going to put the rest in here, and this is going to come out being a somewhat less or lower viscosity. Now, we do not hear that term necessarily a lot in the industry, but related to density and things like that, and other liquid motions, it is one of the common terms. So to explain what it is, viscosity has to do with how thick or watery a particular substance is. And in order to label that, it seems backwards. It sounds like a high viscosity. A lot of people get the impression that a high viscosity is a more liquid material. It's actually the opposite. A lower viscosity is a more liquid material. And a good way to remember that would be that water always sinks to the lowest point. And water is a very liquid. It's like the very low end of viscosity. So, and this is mixed up really well. Now you'll notice this is not even really a paste. This is a much thinner one. And I am going to pause the video, and we're going to do some color mixing because I need some more mica. I will be right back. Okay, I'm back. I've got a little bit more mica. I am going to carefully mix in a bunch of this. Yeah, a bunch. I'm going to go ahead and mix in a bunch of this red. We're going to make kind of a purple color. Probably end up being a bit of a deeper purple. We'll see what happens with it. Again, it's I come around the camera and see if I can get it. It's kind of dark in here, but it's kind of hard to see. Once the mixing is done, once you get the viscosity that you want, again, it's kind of arbitrary, you can whatever you prefer. And this looks like it's coming up to a nice lavender color. You're just going to mix it thoroughly, and again, with pigments, you're going to find it a little bit more difficult. And we have seen, we were looking around on Amazon. Let's see if I can link it, make a link for it. They sell a really small AA powered mixer, and I don't know how well it'll do with lower or higher viscosity, thicker stuff, but it's small enough you could kind of stick it in here and carefully, and I don't know how fast it is, we got to test it, but making a cover for it once you put just a little, I'll do another video on if I can get that to work out, just to make it easier to mix, if you need to mix up a couple ounces for yourself of a given powder. And then we'll probably do a video on how we do between our 12 ounce to 24 ounce patches. You may or may not be able to see the powder kind of clouding up. And you know, always when you add powder, it's also good because of the crevices down the bottom of any particular container you might use. It's good to pour in the hardener first and then do your powders. And a small point about hardener, I do want to point out that we have not tested whether or not this particular process will work with the 3-part hardeners or hardeners that are not 1-to-1 ratio. We have only done this with 1-to-1 ratio hardeners because they're tended to go into 1-to-1 ratio resin. So, all right, it's still got a bit of a lower viscosity to it. That I'm going to go ahead and finish this up. I'll add a little bit more powder and thicken it up. It's just going to get more purple, and then I will do another video coming up. I'm going to go ahead and mix it in and show you how it works over the Stone Coat countertop base tints. Feel free to like, comment, and subscribe. If you have any questions, definitely comment, ask us. We'll go ahead and see what we can do about getting those answers to you. There's a lot of details that go into this, but this is real basic stuff. If you want your own paste, all you need is hardener and powder. Have a great day, and we'll see you in the next video.